Preparing. Boop. Hey everybody, welcome to the Friday 3D Printing Community Hangout. Again, just like the last few weeks, we're just hanging out and chatting. So jump right into intros without any further ado. Paul, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you.
Hey everybody, Paul Poxtelis. I'm an educator interested in 3D printing. I'm primarily on Twitter at ppoxtelis. That's where I do most of my 3D printing stuff, with a little bit on YouTube. Yeah, and as I say, I'm mostly interested in chemistry education and using 3D printing, and I continue to work on projects related to that.
Tell everybody where they can find you. Next up, Dave.
Hey, David Randolph from Printed Solid. You can find me over at printedsolid.com. Been making all the 3D printing stuff, the filaments and everything else going on. And yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Next up, we've got Chris.
Hey everybody, Chris here, 3D printing enthusiast. Catch me at mcrispy1 on Twitter. And yeah, next up.
Next up is Sean, the one who has to show us all up with his lighting setups.
Hi, that's me. My name is Sean. I used to do a lot of 3D printing, and I don't anymore. So that's me. Hi.
All right, so what's everybody been up to? David, it's been a while since you've been on. What have you been busy at?
It's been insane. I've been primarily in filament making mode. With all that PPE stuff going on, everybody's been needing filament. And for about the last 2.5 months, this is the first time I've been home before 10 p.m. So I've been busy.
And how many spools of filament do you make in a day?
Right now, it's about 90 to 100 spools, depending on how ambitious I get for that day.
Paul, what you been up to? You're still working on your molecules around the campus?
Yeah. So when was it? Was it 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago?
2 weeks.
3 weeks.
2 weeks.
I talked a little bit about the garden 3D printing project that we were doing, in which we are identifying plants, and this is part of the University of Maryland chemistry department, where I belong. We are, with a couple of colleagues, identifying plants that are in our garden area and 3D printing molecules that are in those plants that have either medicinal or some kind of pharmaceutical values or interesting chemical properties. And so I continue to do that. I don't even remember if I showed anything last time or not. I think I just showed like screen share, but this is an example of one. I don't remember if I showed this last time or not. This is the pH indicator. This is the cyanidin that can change color based on pH that I talked about. And so I've done a couple of those. I did another one, which I put up on Twitter, which is upstairs. What was that one? Narcyclacine. So that's a anti-cancer agent that's found in daffodils. So I printed it with the atoms looking like the flowers of a daffodil. So that's what I've been up to, primarily with 3D printing, as well as doing things like, additional things like this. This is a big old buckyball. But yeah, mostly molecular printing. I've managed to extricate myself from PPE printing over the last couple of weeks.
What have you been up to, Chris?
So I've also kind of cut back on the PPE. The requests stopped, so I wasn't upset about that. I've been playing a lot with, I should have had it closer. But this little bad boy, it's a fun print. It really is. How it's set up. I'm standing about 25 feet from an standard archery target, and I'm all right with it. It's completely hip shooting. There's no sight on it or anything like that. I tried to put a red dot sight on it, but it's so far off the center line and where it's looking, it just doesn't line up proper at all. But I am getting a little laser dot that'll attach, right on the Piccadilly rail right here, and that's close enough that's going to be, I think, at least a decent eyeball. But this thing's a lot of fun. I probably shot it off 100, 150 times at least. Tonight I did lose one of the bolts. It's in the ground somewhere, buried. And I did finally break one. So I'm working on a second one for my dog. She asked for one, so doing that. And then I decided to do a big print. I said, actually last time we were on, I needed to do a big print for myself on the FT5, 24-hour plus print. And daggone it, the little version of so I'll save that for a little bit. So I'll show you a smaller version. I left it upstairs of what I'm printing big on the FT5. It should be done by this time tomorrow. Be about 360 on the Z. And that'll be the first time I've done something this big on there, and wow, probably a year. So I'm excited about that.
Since the lawn things, right? The big, what's his name? The
Tiki?
The Tiki, yeah, the big Tiki guy. That was
right? Yeah, I did do him on that, but one of the things I did more recently than that, I'm pretty sure, is this one. It's the hand castle.
That's cool.
You know what? I've seen that model over and I never realized there was a hand on it.
Yeah, it's
the stairs go up.
I'm gonna screw. Yeah. I'm gonna screw up his name, but it's Jukka.
Yeah.
Wow.
He does some just like really super creative, otherworldly stuff.
Oh yeah. That's
he also
cool.
he did the moon. I think Moon City is also one of his designs.
Yeah, I think that was like one of his first ones that like put him on the map was the Moon City. Like that really got a lot of attention.
And yeah, that's
yep.
Also done on the FT5.
Wow.
And you can see, I had issues with this one. The next stage for the FT5 is to get it enclosed. I got some cracks in here just from drafts, it being cold and it being, open. So I got to work with my buddy Dave and figure that out.
What's the vertical line on the crater on the backside there? Or is it that's just a shadow, I guess?
That?
Shadow. Nah, right. There's depending on how the light hits it, it looks like there's a crack going vertically up the outside of the crater.
Oh no, none of that.
Just the shadow.
Yeah, no, just DLAM.
Yeah.
You can see this one. It goes a little bit. It cuts across the crater. It stops, and then it comes back again.
Yeah.
But it goes like 2/3 of the way if you put it all together. But yeah, I want to get back to doing big fun stuff on the big printer. That's why I got it.
Yep.
Maybe print a helmet.
There you go.
That is definitely on the list in the near future. Mando helmet.
Sean, what you been up to?
A lot of research. Haven't really been doing anything fun lately. been on the hunt to get back into the film world. So been doing a lot of research and reaching out and learning new programs, learning some new equipment that's in the industry nowadays, so I can try to go that route again. Other than that, not much of anything really. Petting my cat. Pet my cat today.
Doing some finishing on prints, haven't you?
Just one. I just did. I just did this one. It's the Amban from Mandalorian. So I gotta send this to Karl. This is actually Karl's Knack 3D. I just painted it and stuff for him. So, yep, that's that. Other than that, I seriously haven't really. I'm honestly just here to hang out. I don't have anything to talk about really. I did some soul searching over this whole quarantine phase. I've done some inner deep searching in myself, and that was fun. I bought a bunch of cheese balls. I got like 12 cans of cheese balls delivered to my doorstep for like $8.
I saw that. Weren't you trying to buy one box and you got a case or something?
Yeah. It said one box, so I said, yeah, I'll order $5, one box of cheese balls. That's fine. And I didn't know a box was like a case, but I still don't understand how they could be that cheap for like 12 big things. I have so many cheese balls, guys. It's ridiculous.
Basically it's just puffed PLA, right?
I sure hope so. It tastes like it. But yeah, I honestly haven't been doing any projects. All my big projects have been like doing a lot of photography. I've been doing a lot of photography. I've been doing a lot of script writing and learning some development programs and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I had nothing to say.
Picked back up doing photography. I just shot a wedding last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Haven't hardly picked up a camera in a couple, probably 2 years to actually do any photography. And
Wow.
bought a new camera, and then the day my new camera was showing up, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, we're pushing our wedding up for some family medical issues," and asked if I'd shoot the wedding. I'm like, sure, I'll figure out how to use the new camera.
Sure, no pressure.
Yeah, so I started playing with that, dabbling in photography again, finally.
Sweet.
Well overdue.
Nothing wrong with that.
So, Chris, you showed the hand castle that you printed big. So back in March, you guys, some of you on here probably saw I did the stream in my front garden.
Mm-hmm.
That's once they figure out where some of the water's going, I seem to have a leak that doesn't want to show its face. I'm gonna 3D print a waterfall, and Jukka or Yucca or however you say the designer's name that does that castle and the Moon City and stuff. I've been looking at his models for inspiration on the waterfall that I'm going to put at the beginning of it, because I want to do some funky stuff. I want to have the water coming out up at the top and like swirling down around, going inside of it, and coming back out, and not just a straight up waterfall with the water falling, because I'd lose more water that way. But I've been looking at all his castles, working in ZBrush and trying to kind of mimic some of the stuff he's done with his, picking and choosing pieces. That's going to be big. That's going to be like 3 foot tall.
Oh, wow.
All said and done. Yeah. I'm going to do all the chutes and everything for the water to run on. That all of that part is printed. Some of it's going to be real rock. Everything that gets printed is going to get coated in like a kind of like concrete, more like a plaster, where I can like trowel it on basically, but hold up to the elements. So I've been looking at that.
Cool.
No, I was reading the chat. What's everybody else want to do? I'm sure we're all done with PPE and looking to the future project.
Well, I saw that Printed Solid's got some Railcore stuff coming out. Is that correct?
So yeah, we actually are selling Railcore now. We're selling the Railcore kits. We got in with those guys in the Project R3D and have them all set there. The main difference is that since we deal directly with so many of the manufacturers and we actually have our own, little manufacturing building, is that we make a lot of the parts ourselves. So like the panels, the standard Railcore you get from the other places, that's a single-sided texture, a HDPE panel. And I was able to, my plastics people can get me double-sided texture. So now it's got a really nice look to it. And of course, I got enough lasers to choke a small horse. So I went ahead and put doors on them on the printer and made the electronics enclosure and put a nice little cover over that for people. Just kind of upgraded it with everything to get them out there. So it's pretty nice. It works out well. We've already sold some and working our way through it and getting them out there in people's hands and having a good time with that. We got a bunch of flex plates now, so we have our own powder coated flex plates. Those sold out way faster than I thought, so now I have to wait for more to come in on that one.
Those things are freaking awesome. Every single one of my, I've been using the TAS 6 ones on Dave's recommendation for the CR10. They are fantastic. Every single one of mine is getting it. They're freaking cool. I like them.
Then of course, all our filaments, can't keep that in stock.
Can I go back to the flex plates real quick?
Yeah.
What sizes are you offering? I mean, are there just the standard printers, or what are the kind of the ranges that are there?
Well, I'm trying to be more specialized rather than generic sizes.
Okay.
So I actually made plates for all the Lowell's bots, all the Ultimakers, the Railcore, and the Prusas right now.
Okay.
Specifically, like the one he has, you'll notice that I have the corners rounded out to get around the Lowell's bot leveling washers. Yeah. It so happens to fit the CR10 pretty well too, but there you go.
I have one on my Mini. I love it.
And Matt, are you using magnets or clipping on, or what are you doing for?
So I cheated to start with. I just bought cheap sheet magnets off Amazon. They probably won't last very long because of the adhesive, but for the most part on the CR10s, I'm just running like 50-degree bed, so they'll last for a little bit. If I start trying to print like PETG or something, probably have to upgrade to the 3M adhesive magnets. But I'm really impressed with sheet magnets. Like, I remember as a kid, like, you do crafts and stuff like that, and you'd make magnets, and sheet magnets just sucked. But when you put a sheet this size on a full sheet of magnet, and that thing sticks and does not move horizontally at all. I was very skeptical. This is the first flex plate that I've had. And until I got this, I was really skeptical on the sheet magnets to hold down any build surface. I just figured you print something big the first time the nozzle, something bows up a little bit and the nozzle catches it, it would move the whole thing. No, this stays rock solid the whole time.
So yeah, the number one problem you run into with flex plates and magnets in general is that not so much they slide on the platform, but if you get warping or curling on your prints, it does like to pull up. So it is the biggest problem, I'd say, with flex plates.
Yeah, that's what Chris was warning me about with using the cheaper magnet sheets. And I just did it because initially when I got this from Dave, I just used binder clips to hold it down to the bed. But I wanted to do something that didn't have binder clips in the way of the nozzle because that cuts down on your print area. So I got that sheet magnet. But yeah, talking to Chris, he said about running at higher temps and stuff, it'll start to peel off easier as the print pulls up on it.
I'm working with my flex plate guy. My next round of magnets that are coming in are going to be for much higher temp. They should be able to get up to about 120 degrees Celsius before they start losing their hold.
Cool.
So, yeah, I've been impressed with those flexible magnet sheets. They are definitely coming around. They're getting it right.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured like neodymium under the aluminum plate was going to be like the only way to go, or to replace the aluminum plate or something. But I've been impressed with the sheet magnets.
And just to clarify, that you said that these are powder coated, or?
Yeah, they are.
So for what I'm selling, I have powder coated versions, and then I also have blank versions. I wanted to be the guy with blank plates because, you know, us 3D printing people get extremely opinionated. And I wanted to
No.
have a surface for people to sit there and say, PEI sucks. I want Gecko Tech. Gecko Tech sucks. I want Build Tech. Build Tech, you know, just whatever they want to play with type of thing.
On camera.
So I tried to do that for people just so that they could do whatever the heck they want. The only thing I'm trying to convince people not to do is not necessarily put two surfaces on one plate.
Oh, there it is. There's the texture.
There's
You
the
mean
texture.
one on each side?
Right.
What's the drawback?
Well, if you put the thick material like Build Tech on one side and Gecko Tech on the other side, now you got a further distance between the magnet and the steel, so less hold.
Yeah, I can see that. That was the one thing when I got the powder coated that I was kind of like a little bit. I wanted to be able to put a surface on one side and use the P. Now, keep in mind, I've never used PEI either, so this is the first time I ever used PEI. But I had the same idea, you know, put Gecko Tech on the one side because I do like Gecko Tech. To be honest, this is good.
I had the option to get it where it'd be one side would be powder coated and the other side would be smooth, so that people could put whatever surface they want on it, but I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to push people in certain directions, and that's why I kind of avoided that on that one. So I usually will tell people, though, if you do have a blank side, don't leave it blank, put captain tape on it. That's thin enough that it'll be fine, but now you don't have a conductive surface on top of a heating element.
So this is going to sound like a really dumb question considering I'm the host of a 3D printing hangout. What don't you want to print on PEI? What materials? Or are there any for that matter?
What materials you don't want to print on PEI?
Yeah, like Build Tech, the very first Build Tech sheet I ever had, I printed normal distance like you would on tape, like blue painter's tape 6 years ago, and screwed up my very first sheet of Build Tech. I couldn't get the print off of it. But like, is there anything with PEI that it's gonna magically bond to and never let go again?
Never use a TPU or TPE on it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. TPU and TPE are way too darn similar to PEI, and they just love to glue themselves to each other.
Huh.
Yeah, I've always thrown glue down on when doing TPU.
I actually would have never considered TPU to be the one thing that I can't print on that. What about nylon?
Nylon loves sticking to PEI as well, in my opinion. I'd still put glue stick down. It can come off.
Just a release agent.
Yeah, it's nylon. In all honesty, nylon, Gecko Tech every time. I love Gecko Tech for nylon. My God, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. That's where I would definitely, if you had a single-sided PEI powder coated, I would get, because if you have one small enough to fit on like the FlashForge Creator bed, which I forget what the dimensions are of that. Oh, Paul went all squirrely for a second. That's the one printer that I would consider getting one textured on one side and plain on the other, so I could put Gecko Tech on the back.
But
Just
then
because-
the Gecko Tech would put a large enough gap between the magnets and the plate that it would peel up when you were printing on the textured side.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yep.
I went squirrely because I tried to put myself in Adam Savage's cave, but it didn't work.
No,
This- for whatever reason, the zoom backgrounds on Linux, they just don't work.
Huh.
They require a green screen.
must be something with the video for Linux drivers
to
or
be.
something.
Yeah.
You mean I
when
can
did-
get more backgrounds than just the 6 that I have right now?
You can
Yeah.
do custom backgrounds.
Oh,
When
you
did
don't-
that
don't
happen?
get
I
me
didn't even
started on
notice
this.
that.
That's
Yeah,
a whole new rabbit hole.
I was watching one of Adam Savage's one day builds, and I was like, oh, I want to be in his shop. So I tried to do that, but it just doesn't work.
Yeah, you get pieces of your face.
It's almost horrifying.
That is a little scary.
I will admit the one thing that I haven't gotten to do with this yet is print something big enough to actually flex it. I've only printed ear savers on this so far, and they don't pop off very well when you flex it. They just bend with it.
Have you seen the guy? I saw. I wish I could remember him, but he was using flex plates for ear savers, and what he'd done is he hooked a servo up to it to just literally flex the plate while it was on the build plate to clear it
Oh,
off.
no, I didn't see that.
That one I thought was pretty slick. There's a few people that come up with really cool ways to do it. That one I thought was pretty slick.
So let me make sure I understand. So he's actually, where does he have the servos? On the edges
Yeah.
of the build plate?
On the edge of the flex plate to just literally lift up one side, so
Ah,
it
okay,
kind
I
of
see.
curls up and all the pieces come loose, and then you can push them off.
Okay.
And then you put a bucket on the floor, and it literally just pushes them all off into the bucket.
It has been neat to see some of the automatic part ejection that people have come up with in the last couple of months.
It's getting smarter and smarter. I really like it. I like that people are getting around that belt printer patent problem.
Right. Yeah, I saw somebody. I have a Fusion 360 design that I did last year after Karl released the White Knight at Murph. I came home and started. I have a CR10 frame, but it's not even put together because I need a control box. I started modeling in Fusion, and I completed the whole design to put a bed in place of the, or a roller in place of the bed. I saw somebody last week, I think, on Facebook posting pictures, or might have even been 3D printing group on Facebook. They basically exactly what I had designed. They've done now with the CR10, which is pretty cool. Just looking. Powder coat is great for PETG. Bruce says the TPU on it too.
So yeah, the powder coating, I will say this, PETG on smooth PEI put down glue stick. PETG
Something.
on powder coated, it comes out pretty good.
I go with the old Aquanet. Just something in between that PETG and the PEI.
Yeah.
You know, I used to be an Aquanet guy too. You want to know why I switched?
Why?
Aquanet has binders in it to keep it hard to be water soluble.
Huh.
Glue stick stays water soluble.
Okay.
So it makes it real easy to clean up afterwards.
Well, by the time I clean it, it's not so bad. I just put it under the hot water, and I got an old like credit card, and it's like shaving. It just comes off in sheets.
That's kind of how the Aquanet's supposed to be. Glue stick, though, you really can just wash it off without even shaving.
Yeah, glue stick on glass. That's how it was every time I'd clean my bed. Finally, after glue stick application, I wouldn't clean it in between.
Yeah.
And finally, you just take a razor blade and peel it off. It's like, do you ever get Elmer's glue on your skin and sit there and peel it off to see how big of a sheet you can get?
Yep.
But clearing my build plates was using glue stick.
That's how my Prusa plates, Matt, or well, actually all my plates, just from doing ear savers. There's like a buildup of where the ear savers weren't in hairspray because it kept coming off in between.
Yep.
But you know, you didn't have to put it on at a certain point because it didn't need it underneath of it. It was catching enough on the first 2, maybe 3 layers on the sides at that point.
Right. Yeah, that's how the rest of mine over there look. You can see where the glue stick built up, or well, actually, I was using the stuff Paul gave me, and you could see where I'd reapply it. And the dumb thing is, I'd reapply it, and all I really need to do is just wipe it with a wet cloth and redistribute it.
Yeah, that stuff I gave you is it's not like entirely water soluble, but you know it is.
Yeah, water loosens it enough to move it. You get a film across the bed again.
Yeah.
And if you can't find, here, I'll hold it in front of me. It's Tresemme, black can, unscented, extra hold. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing as the Aquanet purple can.
Hey, I hear Target gives you a $5 gift card if you buy $20 worth of hairspray.
Oh yeah, buying that beauty supplies, huh, Matt?
You like it?
Everything I buy for you is for beauty because you're so beautiful already. That was smart, Matt. Good job.
I was taking advantage of a good ad. I was half tempted to go to Target and try that. Like, I'm buying all this stuff for my wife. That is my beauty.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if what my next project is beyond just, printing something big here. And I don't really have anything else lined up. I think I'm going to do some bolt / quiver, like a bolt quiver that I saw on Thingiverse for the Legolini. There are a bunch of different little things on there. My neighbor is begging me to print him one. He's like, "Oh man, I need that. I need it for my garage so bad." I'm like, "Maybe, John. We'll see."
The guy across from you?
The guy I like across from.
Oh, okay. I was like, "Oh, you guys are friends now."
No. Cold day in hell, Sean. Cold day in hell.
Noted.
So I wonder if, like, this is off topic.
Everything's off topic.
Well, true. Kids of the 80s, the movie Hawk the Slayer. Anybody remember it? No.
I was late.
Right. Hawk the Slayer was this fantastic. It was like the Dungeons and Dragons movie that like kind of like just came out on Showtime when I was a kid. I don't remember if it had a theatrical release or anything, but it had a fighter and a magical sword and all these things. But there was one dude who had one arm, but he had an automatic crossbow. And so it was, I didn't question as a kid how an automatic crossbow would actually work, but he just pulled the trigger and he would just continually shoot bolts out of this automatic crossbow. And so the Legolini always reminds me of the crossbow from Hawk the Slayer.
Yeah, I'm trying to see now that you say it was a Showtime thing, is it like one of those deals, for young kids and they're living their life and then all of a sudden, bam, zap, they're in the other world, or
no, it wasn't that.
Okay.
It was meant to be, like kind
Was it
of,
a serious?
it was meant to be like a Dungeons and Dragons adventure with like, there was synthesis. I think I have the movie somewhere. Like I bought it on DVD when I could first find it, but it is like, gosh, I'm trying to remember who the lead actor is. He was, the one thing I remember, he was the main character's dad in Lost. So as soon as I saw him, I was like, "It's Hawk the Slayer! It's Hawk the Slayer!"
Oh, John Terry?
No, it's not John Kerry. But
John Terry.
Was it?
John Terry is his name.
John Kerry?
Terry. Terry.
Terry. Oh yeah, that's it. That makes sense. Terry. John Terry. Yeah, right. Yeah, so it's like this whole movie, and there's there's an elf that is like an expert archer, and there's like a giant, and there's a dwarf. I mean, it's like very like, oh, this is a Dungeons and Dragons movie. And there's a blind wizard that shoots fireballs, and like all these things.
The poster says it all. I'm looking at the poster right now. Oh man.
But that's what the Legolini always reminds me of, is that automatic crossbow.
Well, you got to print one up. It's fun. It's a good time.
I'm gonna do it at some point.
I advise you to order the bolts from Amazon, the arrows, well in advance.
Even
some
from
time.
Amazon.
Yeah, that was the only place I could find them. I think it's we talked about this, Matt. What is it? 160 millimeter or 6¼ inch.
Yeah, I think they're listed as like
Bolts.
6-inch bolts, but they're actually like 6¼ or something.
Yeah, but that's it. That's the only thing that fits. They fit that thing perfectly, but the only place I could find them was Amazon, and they came on the real freaking slow boat from China.
You know what somebody needs to do? Miniaturize that whole thing and make it so it shoots darts, so you can shoot it at your dartboard.
Oh my gosh, that would tear up a dartboard.
Bury the dart.
Okay,
As
so
a-
they're
as
on
a dart
AliExpress
player.
too. Well, Mike, Midnight Giant, he wants to figure out how big he can make it, and
I
I
would figure.
advised against.
He wants to bring it to Earth too, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
I
No,
think
no,
at that
no,
point,
Oh,
no giant Legolinis anywhere.
what if it launches pool noodles that look like darts? All like Nerf and everything. He can launch a pool noodle across the arena.
oh, see,
Yeah,
I was
no.
thinking like logs, like just launching logs.
They're not going to go for that, Matt. Nice try.
Yeah,
Nice
it's worth
try.
it.
I'm just saying, it's that time of year. You can now's the time of year to start stocking up on pool noodles.
There you go.
They're at all the stores now.
Dollar store sells them by the case.
What pool is going to be open this year?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll-
That's why the
All
pool
of
noodles
them.
will be on sale.
There was okay. I gotta find it now. There was a question in the chat that I was gonna ask the panel. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. So, get off my lawn. Films, whoever that is, nice name. So say now that the 3D printing community has gotten some exposure, how can we as makers grow the possibility and expand our horizons? What do you guys think of that one?
Stay in school,
Grow,
don't do drugs.
grow what possibility? I guess is
That was the part of the question that kind of hung me up. Like, I think he means like, with all the PPE and the news coverage on that and everything, like what's next? Like, I know a month ago after one of the streams we were talking, or even late into the stream, about like everybody always asked about 3D printing when it's going to kind of become front and center, and it sort of did now. Like, unfortunately, this is what it took to make it do it, but it did now. So kind of now the question is where it goes from here.
I'll say this. One of my bosses, he asked me through all of this. He knew I was doing the PPE thing, and he had a bunch of questions about it. His wife is apparently a doctor in a practice, and they have a bunch of questions about 3D printing with everything that they were hearing, and he asked me, he's like, hey, can I ask you some questions sometime? And he asked me some questions, what do you think? How'd you get started? What do you recommend? What are the upper lower limits, as far as, possibilities and what you can do. And we talked for a little bit, and it looks like his wife is going to go ahead and they're going to buy a couple of printers and set them up in their office, because they feel that they can, one, use them to pre-plan a little bit, and create a stockpile of cheap, intended to be disposable, disposables. We'll just call it that. They can just have it going in the background. And then they think that there's probably some applications where they can come up with some more, fancy things that aren't so disposable, like little vial and beaker holders and things of that nature. So they're starting to see that there's something to this, and there's maybe something sustainable in that business. Now, I joked with them and said, "Now look, if you're going to go ahead and she's going to hire a director of 3D printing, you damn well better get that job to me." um, but that would be in Texas, so I probably wouldn't go anyway. Um, but so in that respect, I, I think it has opened some eyes. To what level, I'm not sure. I can say that, one of the groups that I've donated to heavily, it's Patients First. If you're in Maryland, you might have heard of them. But they are doing the COVID testing locations in Maryland. I gave them a whole crap load of stuff. And the owner of the company is, been, very thankful about it. I forgot where I was going, but I could see, well, no, where I was going is I could see, a company like that, it makes even more sense to have, one location. Like, you could have a printer at every location, but then have one location that has a couple. So you've got a farm so that you can, again, build up those kind of supplies and have them cheap, ready to go, running in the background, and somebody figures out that there's a new flavor of a thing that they need. Yeah. So, I hope so.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it goes beyond just the medical community too, right? Which is kind of the nice thing. I had a friend who works for the Teamsters, and they got to deliver stuff. They got drivers out doing things, and they were having difficulty getting PPE. So they were basically like, hey, maybe we need to get a couple 3D printers and be printing some of this stuff in the situation where we can't get it from normal suppliers. So
I gotta say, there's two ways we could take it at this time. Is that there's a lot of momentum behind it. There's a lot of, we have a lot of FaceTime, as I would call it, with general people. Is that we can either say, all right, well, now's the time that we can finally get out there and explain 3D printing to people. This is the first time that people finally can look at 3D printing, and it's not us printing benchies and trinkets and stupid junk. It's, it finally brought practicality of 3D printing in front of people's eyes.
Right. And good practicality.
Yeah, great practicality. So we can take that approach that we're finally going to be able to go around, teach the world, show the world what we've been doing. That's one side. The other side, and this is me definitely getting on a soapbox here, so bear with me, is it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about the flaws in the patent system in the United States. This is what happens when we have more leadway and more freedom in patent systems. And look, this all happened because a patent expired 12 years ago.
Right.
It's something great. It's a great lesson for that. So, I mean,
well, and
a few things to go out there with.
To build on that, Dave, too, it's a good exercise of open source and the Creative Commons licensing and everything. I mean, the ear savers that I started printing were the same ones that the 14-year-old Boy Scout, or however old he was, in Canada designed. That was the first design that I started printing. And then I designed my own. I put mine out for other people to download, just because it was faster to print and use less material, things like that. Prusa's design, he put that out. And then the Swedish face shields, that was one of the things that I kind of kept talking about when I talked to the newspaper and the TV networks and stuff. that was the one thing that I pushed is, this started with something that wasn't even my own design, but they put it out there for everyone to print. It was a great exercise in why open source and Creative Commons is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean that's where that's why I think that's a great lesson. It's a soapbox lesson, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
But it's a great political lesson. It's a great societal lesson, to help us. I mean, to help the industry, the people, and show that if you don't have these extremely strict patents, that now you don't have one factory and one company like 3M being the only guys that can make N95 mask, and
Right.
we're stuck with their workflow. It allow if we have some freedom in that, now what you end up with is you've got 30,000 different people in their houses all over the United States, all manufacturing when the shit hits the fan. Pardon my friend, sorry about that. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's when things get bad, we can open up manufacturing to a wider net instead of being stuck with one company in charge of everything.
But then you have some subset of those people who see that now and say, yeah, it's manufacturing, but gosh, there's a lot of things that I would like to do around my house.
Yep.
Where now I could, this is potentially accessible to me.
Right.
And I think we're going to draw more makers into the community with this, which is, altogether a good thing. I don't think it's going to have like some, monumental impact where things change overnight, but it will definitely, it's going to help things out. I mean, and the PPE thing, we tried not to talk about it the last time we were on here. It has brought people together.
Oh, yeah.
People who have 3D printers who normally would not, interact with each other, they now do.
Yep.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. David, your first benefit to it or outcome from it, you said about, now is the chance to educate people. Leading into this, I was supposed to be doing classes locally on 3D design, 3D printing, laser cutting, basically at-home makerspace. I was set up with our local rec commission to start doing classes. And everything, of course, got put to the wayside. Like they basically canceled everything through the summer this year. But just like you said, this opened up a lot of eyes. I mean, I still had a lot of people coming to me saying, hey, I need ear savers. I don't know anything about 3D printing. I'm like, well, that's perfect. Right now, you don't need to know anything about 3D printing. I'm doing that. I need to know that. You don't. But it's funny you said about, educating, Dave, because that is something now that allows me to say, I made X number of these during this crisis and helped a lot of people, at least gave them some kind of relief, let them know they weren't alone in this. Here's what this was capable of doing from within my basement. I mean, every time I saw like the newspaper article and stuff from the interview with me, everything made it sound like Flinchball Designs, which is my tiny little Etsy shop that currently has nothing listed on it, was this big business that I started 3D printing. And I had to kind of roll people's expectations back. It's like when people would come to me and go, I need 1,000 ear savers. I'm like, oh, that's going to take like a week. So I had to educate them that no, I'm just, I'm doing this in my basement. Yes, I'm out of the ordinary. I have 12 printers versus most people have 1 or 2. But now I get to take this and roll it into that class and show this is why you might want to dabble in this. Yeah, here's the pretty things. I always show, here's the pretty things I've printed, my helmets and stuff like that, because that's what makes people go ooh and ah. Practical parts, we've always said before, practical parts aren't pretty. They're hidden away and make something work most of the time.
They're boring and no one shows them off.
Exactly. Yeah. So, oh, what do you 3D print? Well, here's the helmets that I print. Oh, they're cool. And then here's some of the practical things, like, this wedge-shaped thing. That's not fun to look at.
But you can go through and say, I've fixed this and this and this and this and this with my 3D prints, where otherwise I would be throwing it in the trash, filling up the landfill, right? Otherwise,
Yep.
Instead, I've done it myself.
I mean, it's a great example to lead into it, like I said, because the PPE stuff, people immediately said, oh, wait, 3D printing has a use. And that's what it did really a good job of. So now people can look at 3D printing, and I think a good way to look at it is that it's helping people realize that you don't have to be Elon Musk to invent something. You don't need $60 billion to invent the next thing. You just a couple $1,000 and you're off and running.
Yeah.
The other aspect of it that I find interesting that's kind of come into play. Now, I'll say this: I work for AT&T during the day, and one of the things that telecom companies try to do, and Dave, you'll appreciate this, is we're into something edge networks, where if where we don't keep the movie that you're watching on your download, we're not keeping that at the headquarters in Dallas. That's in a data center out by you, so that there's less latency, faster download, better experience for you. So all that data is out on the edge of the network. And this is a parallel that I draw from 3D printing to work. All the PPE manufacturing that you had going on out there, that was edge manufacturing. That was manufacturing happening right where it is that you needed it. Like Hallam, PA, Matt. There's not another manufacturer in Hallam, PA making these things, but you're there with your machines.
Right.
And I think that's also, to me, I guess because of what I do in my day job, it's just neat to see that aspect of what's going on. And then otherwise, you saw, rapid prototyping. You saw that you can go from rapid prototyping to mass manufacturing, like Joe did, very quickly, turning his, a good number of his machines around to produce. And then on top of that, you can go ahead and do a no tool product change, make a change in your product without having the cost, time, or delay of retooling anything. Just it's a new CAD and go. And then you throw the edge manufacturing in there. To me, I saw the whole industry kind of put itself another notch or two forward, and showing off that's a wide breadth of capabilities right there, and there's four things in my mind.
The only thing I would change about that is I think a better term might be cloud manufacturing, just because consumers would get that.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, you're right. Cloud manufacturing. That's Dave. We need to put that on a thing.
Wait. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Edge manufacturing is a better technical term, but it really reacts like cloud services do. The idea that you have these people that are uncontrolled nodes out there that all respond properly and distribute the load surprisingly evenly worldwide is what we had. So it's a really great way to do it. So no, I think cloud manufacturing should be the term. I'd go to the media with that one. The local news company would get that.
That was one of the things with the newspaper. That, like, talking to the reporter, she asked me, like, is there anything specific out of the interview that you want in the newspaper? And the one thing I said is rapid innovation. Like, if tomorrow the medical community said, hey, we've had enough ear savers, but we need this.
All right, we'll start
or,
that in an hour.
hey, this thing doesn't even exist. Here's what we have. Here's what we need. Even if it's, like the COVID testing areas, if it's a pen holder that makes your job easier, like, you give me the idea of what you need, and if I can accomplish it, I can pivot. That was the thing I told the newspaper. If tomorrow the medical community said we need this, I can pivot and start making that device quickly, like pushing the rapid innovation.
We saw that in the DC area specifically. The group that I was working with, we were doing, face shields. We got an email. It was like a Friday that said DC EMS needs adapters for their CPAP machines when they're transporting people to the hospital. Here's a model. And by Monday, we had done nearly 1,000 of them for them. And they were things that they couldn't buy. They were completely out of stock. And we just turned around and, the group got together and had them out. It was really cool to see.
And I think that's what most people outside of our world don't understand. We have a hard time explaining that to people too.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all know anybody who's dealt with manufacturing is the slowest part of making something, is getting it to the manufacturing floor. I mean,
and most people never experience manufacturing.
Right.
I mean, hell, a lot of 3D printing people have never experienced true manufacturing techniques.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in 6 years that I've had a 3D printer, the amount of stuff that I've designed from scratch and printed to customize something, fix something, or just make something pretty, like, some of that stuff most of that stuff I never would have been able to accomplish had I not gotten into this hobby.
And as far as speed of manufacturing, let's not forget companies like CME when they made their injection mold.
Yep.
And the other companies that made, the quick max cutters and the other injection mold systems out there, they were still almost a month and a half into this. And it was their primary goal with all resources allocated to doing that.
Right.
And a month before that, we're all sitting there in our houses printing out, countless numbers of these.
Right.
Ready to go. So even when you fully activate manufacturing, 3D printing was still faster.
Right. And that's the key thing. Matt Gordon put it best on a post that I did on Facebook. Because we hit a slow point in like the ear savers about a week and a half ago. It just like almost completely tailed off. Like I'll get maybe one or two every couple of days requesting them. Whereas before it was like 5 or 6 people requesting, 100 at a time each in a day. And I just put a message out there saying, hey, we are still, if you need them, we're still making them. Or if there's something else, again, the rapid pivot in direction, and Matt replied, and he's absolutely right in what he said. He's like, we were a great stopgap. 3D printing was a good stopgap while CNC spun up their injection molding and manufacturing caught up with where we were at. Now is a good time for us to kind of take a step back again and let the the actual manufacturing injection molding, which now that it's spun up is way faster.
Yep.
And I think they crank out as many an hour as I do in an entire day. So, yeah. And I kind of did. At that point, I scaled back. I hit 1,000. Dave, you and I were talking about this before the stream. I hit 1,000 in reserve that weren't requested, and I just stopped at that point. And I just bagged up 100 of them. I probably got, I don't know, maybe 50 left yet, because it kind of tailed off now, which, like I said, we probably flooded our local area, which is all we were really focusing with. But
that's what you want to do, right? I mean,
right.
Honestly, that's why it works well, is because you can get them where they need to be immediately.
I mean, we can't hit those mass manufacturing numbers, but collaboratively, cloud style, we can all hit those numbers. But what's really interesting is, let's say CNC, their injection mold, they found out that there was a flaw with the tilt angle on the top shield part that somehow was, becoming an incubation point for the virus. CNC kind of has to sit there and stop for a month while they go and redo the mold and start over, because they're using that manufacturing technique. It's just the way the world works. Us 3D printing people, we just sit there and go, all right, turn the power off, turn it back on, give me an SD card, let's get going. I mean, we could have the new solution before lunchtime and already start manufacturing.
Yeah, at least start the prototypes and getting them out in the field. Even if that, again, you know, go back to the stopgap comment. Even if what we're doing is the rapid prototype to get it in the field, get it field tested, get it approved, whatever channels you want to. I mean, this whole deal opened up a lot or removed a lot of restrictions on using some of this stuff without it being certified and going through. I mean, the face shield injection molds and stuff, they'd still be being certified and all that if they were going the proper channels right now.
Yep. So, I mean, and that's kind of what we can do is because, I mean, with 3D printing, we can go through 20 revisions in a week.
Right.
Standard manufacturing, they'd be lucky to go through 1 revision a month.
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
really lucky if they could pull that off.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention that there were some downsides to what happened with PPE production. I mean, there were situations where that whole open source idea and the idea that you were helping the community were sort of pushed aside. I mean, I read an article of a kid in the Bay Area selling door openers for $15 a pop.
Oh yeah,
Hundreds of them.
I know.
And so there were kind of things that were.
There were bad sides to it.
Yeah,
but now, if we go on the flip side, don't forget that one guy that all of a sudden got a giant deal for $86 million of N95 manufactured mask and didn't actually have any.
Right.
You know, so I hate to say it, but it's that evil that applies to everything. You know, there was the other company that was selling those darn masks for $75 a piece, and people were buying them left and right.
Well, and Shapeways, right?
I didn't want to say the name, but yeah.
I think it was only 45
or 45, but still 45 compared. While the rest of us are just looking at the problem and going, no, this should be free, you know, or at cost at most type of thing. You know, so unfortunately, as 3D printers, we couldn't get past that evil side of manufacturing, as I like to say. You know, we couldn't get past that money greedy side of things. It sucks.
There is a sub kind of a different this is maybe changing the topic a little bit, but like a little bit difference in I don't want to say personality, viewpoint, worldview for I think for people who are 3D printing versus the general population. You know, I bought my brother a 3D printer and you know a CR10, and he uses it and he likes it. He makes little doodads and whatnot, but I think the general population always thinks like, how am I going to monetize this? How am I going to make money out of it? And how can I patent that? And I think this comes to a lot of the point that you were talking about earlier, Dave, which is, yeah, there are some times when it makes sense to not do that. And I think we can take in this community, look at Prusha's example for how they've done things and been very successful with having things that are completely open.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had people tell me with the ear savers, I had comments all the time about, oh, you should patent this. Like, one, nope, there's already designs before mine. But two, I have no interest in it. Like, I just want the design to be out there. Sure, there's some things that I've designed that, yeah, I could patent them. Or I could just release them and, you know what? I reap the benefits of other people's designs for a year or two as I was learning how to do CAD. Why shouldn't somebody else get that same advantage from me to be able to reap the benefit of me putting it out there for free?
That's the idea. I mean, that's the whole free concept, the whole open source movement from that standpoint is a little it's a little different that people have a hard time understanding the money making side of it. And I kind of like to explain it to people. I go online and people sit there and they think open source is really a way for companies to get free intellectual property to steal or, you know, to clone. And that's not really the purpose of open. That's the bad side effect of open source.
Yeah.
The good side effect of open source is that if a new company is smarter than me and better than me, they can make a better product based off what I did. And I should welcome that, because now I can use what their ideas to make a better product and become the better company, and vice versa. That's what open source is supposed to be about. That's the idea, that someone takes my idea and makes it better. And now I can take their idea and make it better. And that's our fight. And that's our fight of monetizing, is that we're not being locked down because David thought of the square peg and Tom thought of the round hole. And, you know, Matt figured out how to put the square peg in the round hole. And so he gets the patent. You know, all three of us can actually sit there and make our own version of the square peg in a round hole. And then we all realize, why don't we just have a square hole and a square peg? You know, and that's what I think open source is supposed to be about. And then the profit comes from the support, the intellectual platforming, the quality, the manufacturing of it. And someone else can crush you on that. You know, that's kind of the idea. You can still make open source a business model. It's just, let's not lock people out from doing it.
Right.
All right, I'm off my soapbox.
The what's his name?
Platypus.
The beta platypus.
So, a lot of people, I think, look at open source as a dirt crunching hippie movement thing, and I'm kind of, no, it's not that. It's just another business model.
Yeah, it's just a different way of doing things.
You know, Bruce did a good job. He's made it a good business model.
Yeah.
Remind me to tell you sometime about the when I talked to the woman who came up with the term open source when I was in high school.
Oh, nice.
Christine Peterson.
Okay, yeah.
She was out at the Foresight Institute in California, and I just called him up on the phone one day.
All I remember is, you know, I was out in San Francisco when the patent expired on 3D printing, and we were all having a party at the local hackerspace. We were all sitting there with our printers all ready to run, and we're like, yay!
So everybody was like geared up and ready to go when that happened?
Yes. So.
Sean, you should
That was-
get on the stream.
That was back in your Attack of the Show days now, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was right towards the end of that was when the patent expired.
Okay.
I was in LA at the Attack of the Show, and I just moved up to San Francisco when that all happened.
Huh.
That happened while I was at Revision 3. So.
I was gonna say you're in good crowd for that event.
Yeah, I was in good crowd for that event. San Francisco is where it's at. I always like to tell people that there were the companies like Type A Machines was out in San Francisco. MakerBot was out in New York, and I feel like that those were the two opposite sides of the country working on their thing. It's kind of funny, but they were all in their spaces. They were all celebrating. I was at the tech shops out there in San Francisco, and I'd probably say for that first year after that expired, that's every meeting. That's all it was about, was how we're going to make the better printer. What was the improvement? What was the one part we could do? So, and it's amazing how much innovation happened in that 1 year, because 3D printers were horrible when they were patent locked down, but literally within the first year of the patent dropping, 3D printers got insanely better. And look at them now.
I say, yeah, just look where they are now.
Or manufacturing, it's here.
Yeah. I mean, come on, I'm sitting there with my lasers and mills and 3D printers and vinyl cutters and pick and place machine. I mean, all these different machines doing all these different things, and they're all well within the realm of having it in your spare bedroom.
Yep.
it won't be long until this whole extrusion line thing is very accomplishable in the house on a very quality scale. You know,
Has there been any changes in like fill extruder and stuff like that, like the home extrusion? I know I've seen a couple more YouTubers playing with like fill extruders or making their own systems. Have we seen much change there for in-home?
there's actually several decent ones that are coming out for the home people. I mean, their tolerances are still a little wonky, and the material's a little wonky, and raw material's an issue. But it's starting to get there. It won't be long until a single phase extrusion on your dining room table is very accomplishable on a reasonable amount. However, there are now several pellet extruder designs that are coming out and that are out.
Yep.
And maybe we don't need filament at all.
And they look real nice too.
I'm screwed, but you know, I'm still excited for 3D printing.
I
Okay.
mean, it's not going to be the be all end all. I don't think
Right.
there's a be all end all. I just think it's, you know, I don't think every printer is going to have a pellet printer or a pellet, you know, extruder on it.
I joke, but I am kind of excited about the idea of pellets extruders on printers.
I'm excited about it to see what people do with it more than, you know, just running PLA pellets through, like making, you know, people messing around with the idea of blends of filament and stuff. Like, you have Collar Fabs had their PLA PHA filament for years. To see what people do, people always say, oh, you can't mix this, you can't mix that. And while some situations chemically it just doesn't work,
Yep.
other times it's mainly just because nobody had a use for it or a reason to do it, and they say you can't do it. Put that in the hands of a
I'm
bunch of
really excited to start seeing all the photos on Twitter of people that mix some really bad stuff that shouldn't have gotten mixed in their extruder.
Daddy, it's a watch for want to know.
What do you mean I can't extrude Jello?
Like hell.
That's how I make my filament flexible, right? I just put some
Sweet.
Jello mix in there.
I've seen one pellet extruder and it was not particularly successful, but I hope the new ones are better.
I think
Augustine is running one, and he seems to love it. He's got a little hand crank deal that he's a hand crank shredder, and is it? I can't remember who it was that made it.
oh, I know, yeah. Shoot, who did
But
that?
I think Stefan at CNC Kitchen is also running with the same setup, and they seem to like it. And you know, I think Augustine's point with it is he's just trying to show the circle. You know, he prints something, he doesn't like it, and he shreds it up, and he prints it again.
Yep.
And you know that he's going for that no waste, you know, very green cycle. And you know, I think that's really neat that I mean, watching him over the past, I don't know if he's been at this for 2 years, because I know he was using the blender for a good while, and then he's what did he call that, Matt? He had a name for it when he did he put it in the blender and then he would just melt it and then he would cut the sheets, and
Yeah.
he was making like stenographs with it and stencils and things like that.
And here's something people don't think about 3D printing is that it's amazing how, you know, environmentally conscious 3D printing is, just the way it is. I mean, compared to standard manufacturing, I don't know if you've ever seen, you know, a standard injection mold, the amount of plastic that's wasted in the screw on each print is not even is tenfold more plastic than what we waste on supports. And they have to generate 10,000 in a run. They have no choice. You know, that's kind of the bottom number. And 3D printing, if you need 980, we can do that. You don't need, we don't need to have to make 10,000 to make something.
Right.
So I think 3D printing naturally has always been environmentally friendly. And it's kind of awesome to see people play with it more and more. I love the fact that 3D printing has made PLA very popular. PLA wasn't a very popular filament for the longest, or plastic for the longest time, and then 3D printing made it kind of popular. And now, and not because of us, but now that the food industry thinks it's popular, and now it's hard for us to get PLA. So it's kind of interesting, but it's kind of nice. Get us further away from styrenes.
Yeah, except that I did warm up some food I had in the microwave and tried to use a PLA fork with it. That didn't work very well. I would like to see it be more compostable. That would be nice.
I would like to see a truly compostable plastic for 3D printing.
I've keep kicking around the idea of trying to come up with a good pre-treatment mechanism for PLA. So all the home printers that have all the PLA, you could basically throw them in a big tub of warm water and do an enzymatic treatment that would basically start breaking everything down so that it would actually compost. Haven't gotten there yet, but
that would be cool.
There are, in the scientific literature, there are polylactic acid depolymerases, enzymes that are out there that do that. So I keep thinking I'm gonna clone them and do some experiments and make it happen. But
put them in a bottle and patent them.
Open source, man.
But no, I'd like to see that. I would like to see a much more compostable material. I think that would go over well for people, because right now people use PLA as their revision 1 a lot of times. It's their prototyping filament, and then they might go into something else for their final version. So I'd love to see a prototyping filament that only lasts 6 months, and in a compost pile, something like that.
I think the biggest key with it is finding, like, everything you look at that's green. Typically, you think green, you think money. It costs more money to do it. I think that's the big thing, is to get something out there that's reasonably priced. Like, to some extent, you think, if I'm going to prototype something that's able to be composted, it can't be the price of a roll of protopasta that I only print specific things with, because it's more expensive. I think that's the biggest hurdle with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some cheap material out there. If I was able to use the same stuff as expensive materials to make my cheap stuff, there's got to be a way to bring that down a notch.
Well, starches. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much people have done with that. They burn when you get too hot, but
I wonder if we could stabilize starch to be a reasonable extrusion.
Cellulose acetate.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad. That's pretty compostable.
Some PHBs maybe.
Isn't cellular acetate, isn't that what, like, packing peanuts are made out of?
That are what?
Aren't they? What was it, Chris?
Cellulose acetate.
Yeah, isn't that what, like, packing peanuts are made out of? Like the biodegradable one?
The biodegradable ones. I don't know. Actually, I know cellulose acetate is not going to be water soluble, so that's probably not the packing peanuts, because we use cellulose acetates as membranes. So you can put them in different porosities, so you can actually use them as selective membranes.
Cellulose acetate should be freshwater soluble, Paul. At a temperature of 21 degrees Celsius, it's 90% biodegradable within a maximum of 56 days.
Well, 56 days, yeah, but you don't. I'm talking about like immediately water soluble.
Gotcha.
That, I mean, well, immediately water soluble would be a PVA print, but I'm thinking more of something that people can put in their composter, and it should deteriorate at about the same rate as a banana peel, let's say.
Yeah.
Because PLA, as it is today, that stuff isn't composting.
Yeah, we were just talking about that today in a chat or yesterday, one of the two, about like your big prints outside and mine and how they're holding up. I've got PLA stuff that's been sitting on my front porch for 2 years now through all the weather, and it looks basically as good as the day I printed it. So,
At most, it might have some UV damage, but that'd be about it.
yeah, and actually, like in the case of my two, the only UV damage is the paint that's on them. Like, it's starting to peel and stuff, but like as far as getting brittle or somewhat, the paint might be protecting that a little bit, I'm sure. But it's not getting brittle, it's not warping, and heck, the one thing's printed completely hollow. I mean,
Maybe something like cornstarch and cellulose acetate, something along those lines.
A little blend.
A little blend, mainly just because cellulose acetate, I could imagine, would burn like crazy. And maybe you could just use the cornstarch to avoid that part.
Yeah, it's gonna burn too, though.
Mm.
I mean, you could.
Stop.
There's got to be some other blends that can be tried.
Ow! You stop biting me.
If only we knew somebody who had an extrusion line to test all these things out on.
Seriously, if you give me a bucket of stuff and say, see what happens, I'd turn it on and throw it in there and have the fire extinguisher ready.
Okay.
Boy.
Well, I do know a couple of polymer chemists who are also into 3D printing, so I can query them and see if they have some ideas.
oh, cellulose acetate, that's what ping pong balls are made out of. Not, yeah, okay, that's what I was trying to think of.
I mean, Dave, I can't remember his name, but we always had the back in the days of some hangouts at Printed Salad. I can't remember his name, but the one guy works for DuPont. He would always come in with some fun plastics that he printed with that he got from the workshop at the old DuPont lab that week.
See, the problem you're on with that is that when he brings that stuff into it, it's all DuPont locked in, and
yeah,
he won't tell you much. He can't tell you too much.
Remember that patent conversation?
Yeah.
No, he never does. He's very good at teasing that stuff.
Yeah, and they're cool stuff.
But here's the deal, Paul. If you bring up the bucket of stuff to pour in Dave's extruder, you can stop at my house, and then I'll drive us up to Dave's and I'll buy the beer and the pizza.
And call me on your way so I can meet you there.
Okay.
That sounds perfect.
Wait, what?
We'll start with the pH sensitive filament. How about that? That would be a good
I really want to see.
That's a color additive, so that's an easy one. That one I think would go over well.
I mean, all we have to do, Paul, is come up what's the application.
I can tell you right now how I'm using it. I use acid to clean cooling towers, and right now I use an acid that has a pH indicator in it. It's hydrochloric acid with a pH indicator, or not hydrochloric. Yeah, it is. It's hydrochloric acid. Has a pH indicator in it. If we had filament, I'd be printing dipsticks to dip in and see, because the problem that I get is like the mixture is different from top to bottom in the sumps. So I'd put a dipstick down in that I could still see through the water and see the color changes. I wouldn't get a true pH indication because I'd have to pull it back out to look at it. It would change anyway. But I could dip that. That would be the first thing I'd be doing. I'd take it to work and stick it in some acid right away.
Your daddy.
Well, I'll tell you right now, having an extrusion line and the labs that I have working on my colors right now and all that stuff, they have all the additives, they have all that stuff. And I have quite literally a list that I could clone almost every single filament out there without even flinching. And I think that's boring. And I talk to them on the phone and they go, yeah, most people have turned most of the ideas that we have and all that into filament already, and I'm like, okay, I need some other cool stuff. So, you know, anything I can think of or have cool ideas and try stuff, I am totally down for.
Yep. I think we need a day of Paul coming to Printed Solid on a Saturday and with random buckets of stuff.
Now, here's the catch to color and additives. It needs to be a solid. You already know the melting and temperatures and all that stuff, but it needs to be relatively a solid, and it can't be a powder. It needs to be relatively chunky.
So like granular.
That gets a little harder. Can you do like talc mixtures? Like you might do like some amount so that you get, you know, a chunk as opposed to a powder, because
Right,
most
and
of the time when you get these, they're powders.
It can turn back into a powder. It just can't be put into the machine as a powder.
Otherwise it
Oh,
settles.
so it would just settle down and you'd end up getting a blob of it going through.
Right. So what ends up happening is that it relies on it getting mixed in with the pellets, and that's how it gets its dosing. But after it gets into the actual extruder, it's fine.
I see.
So
All right. Yeah, sure. I'm sure we could. That's something that we could work through.
pretty much wet it down, pelletize it, and then dry it out, and then that can go in, and then it gets crushed down into powder.
Okay.
That's fine.
Is there something you could add to it that would break down in with the heat as the heat's added to it? That would,
Well, a water mixture, and then just literally roll it till it clumps up, and then break it up, and there you go. And then dry it, and that would be enough. It just needs to be solid enough to mix.
yeah, because like all your color additives and all that are pelletized when you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it just needs to be solid enough to mix, and then after it goes into the extruder, it can turn into a powder.
I wonder how that worked. Like when Joel made the original High Five Blue, and they put the caffeine in it, because that was pretty much a powder that they dumped in then.
Yeah, they're using much smaller screws.
Okay.
So you can actually inject the powder right at the very last second.
Okay.
I just don't have a system to inject a fine powder in yet. I need to work that out.
I have a drill.
So what Dave's saying is when Printed Solid puts a tweet out that the extrusion line is broken, it's because we all convened on Printed Solid and started playing.
Because I showed up with my drill.
Stick something in there that'll jam the hell out of it.
Now,
Here's the
no, I
best thing.
just saw something. Go, Dave.
I was gonna say, I have a whole other barrel, a whole other screw, a whole other die set. If we did anything short of setting it on fire, I could still get the line back up in a day.
Okay.
I mean, we saw your electronics work around there. That's pretty good. So good for you. You point to it behind your head there.
So, yeah, that part blew up right there. That part blew up, and I had to do a quick Arduino fix.
Did you ever get the permanent fix for that, or?
Oh yeah. That they came in like 2 days later. I
Okay.
was lucky.
Now, I just saw in the room, Bob Carnes said something about low resistive conductive. And how about we come up with something that's, conductive, i.e., we put some juice to it and it gives us some light.
Oh, you're talking like being able to actually print a electroluminescent.
Yeah. Something like, L-wire kind of comes into my head, but 3D printable L-wire that, you put a.
The issue with that is usually that kind of stuff takes, pretty high voltage, low current, but high voltage to do it. Like EL wires, like 10,000 volts or 1,000 volts or something.
That's someone else's problem.
It'll look cool. Just don't lick it.
Now the problem you would run into is probably with that EO, the bioluminescent, I can imagine that mixture would be surprisingly abrasive on someone's printer.
Next time I go to the Outer Banks, I'll bring you back some sand that has a bioluminescent bacteria or something in it.
I just say we go out in the
Algae.
field and collect a bunch of fireflies and then just grind them up.
Squeeze them. They're pelletized to begin with.
Yeah, they're pelletized. They're ready to go.
Yeah, sorry, that's not going to work.
Not gonna work.
That sounds more like
You need to have both luciferin and luciferase. So you have to have the protein enzyme that metabolizes the luciferin in order to make it glow.
Okay,
Figure it
now
So,
how about
dual extrusion?
how about a filament that you're able to plant seeds in to help sprout and grow seeds?
That would have to go with the biodegradable.
Yep.
When you find that
Yeah.
rapidly biodegradable, then you could implant seed.
You couldn't.
Your
You
problem
couldn't
would be
extrude it with
extrusion.
the seeds in it, because the
What was
heat would
that?
kill the seed.
That's true.
No. When it's done, you'd be able to like poke a hole in it and put the seed in, almost like a seed starter.
Yep.
You'd be able to put the seed in after it's done printing. You don't print the seed into it. But after it's done printing, you poke a hole, put the seed in, and then that plastic has all that nutrients, or you could soak it in different, nutrient balances for the plant. I don't know, just something I was thinking of, because you can go. I went to the garden store the other day, and I found those little seed starters, and they're just like little cups and with like sand in there or whatever, and you just put the seed in, and then you can plant the seed once it grows, replant it. But I was thinking, like, if I could print something like that on the printer and then just soak it and put it in a hydroponic system and not have to, do anything,
Yeah.
that would be really sweet.
That gets back to having something that would degrade fast enough, right? Because you need it to degrade quick enough that you get root growth, as opposed to, like you put a hole in it, if the roots can't expand, plant's not going to grow.
I mean, yeah, at that point, I'm thinking you're looking at like at more of a paste printer, and your paste is like peat pot material.
Mm-hmm.
But Sean, that makes me think of the special. It just triggered a thought. Years ago, I watched this special. They're trying to reestablish mangroves along the shoreline, and trying to do it quickly in an area where the mangroves got wiped out. Mangroves protect the shoreline from eroding, blah, blah, blah. So they're trying to figure out how to, using aerial methods, create a delivery system where they can drop mangrove seeds and get them to, drop them from a plane, and they hit the ground. They go into the ground far enough that they're able to establish themselves, but they don't. But the capsule gives them enough protection that it doesn't kill the seed on impact, etc. But I'm thinking, this conversation here, I'm seeing a bunch of little darts, being made in like little peat pot, little little ice cream cones, and you put the seed in the middle, and you drop hundreds of those out of the sky, and
exactly
down there, and they could plant you could plant a forest relatively quickly.
Yeah, and you can manufacture it, and you're not wasting other resources on it, and it would be
Now I'm seeing a lot of little ideas in the chat, and then I want to kind of clarify one small problem with 3D printing that ruins a lot of the ideas in chat. So I'll kind of say it all at once. Remember that ultimately we are 3D printing with plastics, and we're kind of stuck with plastic as a base. It has to be somewhere in that relative family. Then we can put stuff into it. So a true wood filament is wood suspended in plastic. A true metal filament is metal suspended in plastic. So you can add more values to it, but it still has to retain the value of a plastic, or something within that plastic family.
And your other big limiting factor is, look at the size of the nozzle that you have to push whatever material you put in through.
Yeah.
And like some of the things, when Sean said about the putting seeds in, heat wasn't my thought. It was, most seeds are too big to go through anything but like a 1.0 nozzle, and even that's too small for most of it.
I mean, yeah, we can come up with some crazy extruder and make a 6 millimeter nozzle and all that stuff and go nuts. But just the idea for people to understand is that you're mixing something into a plastic mix. So an example, there's a reason why we don't have a low resistance filament. It's because they actually already are mixing low resistant materials into plastic, and it gets high resistance because ultimately it has to deal with the plastic in there.
Right.
You know, wood filaments are not more wood than they are plastic. That's
Yeah.
the problem we run into.
About the closest thing you get to a higher percentage is what's the company that makes the metal infused filament where you can then put it in a
The
forge?
foundry.
You center it.
Yeah, you center it.
And the idea about that is that the metal is literally suspended in plastic, and then you have to melt it and weld the metal together at the same time.
Right.
Yep, they were running, I think, at least originally around 90% metal, and I think they were trying to bump it on the copper. I think they were trying to get it up to as high as 95%.
What was the biggest problem with that filament, or is the biggest problem? I guess they're still around.
Well, one, it was extremely expensive.
Well,
And then two is very brittle.
Yep.
That was my issue. The stuff I couldn't print a little low poly dinosaur. Like I got, maybe 20 millimeters and done. The stuff it just falls apart. But what you could get to print was pretty good, but then you also had to have a kiln. And you also needed to have some additional things, and they explained it to me. It was supposedly sent out to me, but there's some preparation work that needs to be done before you kiln it, and it needs to be treated, wrapped up, or some other things.
They're probably literally just acid burning out all the plastic just to make the stintering process a lot stronger.
Right.
And let's not forget, anytime you add something to these plastics, it changes the properties of the plastics to some degree, depending on what you add. And if you've ever tried to print with very white filament, you know how that works.
Yep. I always like to tell people, and a lot of people don't get this, it's just standard basic color mixes. My non-glitter filaments, my standard filaments, the ratio of color to plastic affects things, and that can go from 100 to 1 to 25 to 1 as a ratio. So that can affect, as you can say, yeah, it does affect it. And white is 33 to 1 is its mixed ratio on average. Black is 25 to 1, but white, because of its base, tends to cause more problems for people.
That titanium dioxide, I actually have, at one point, Protopasta sent me a bunch of just sample stuff that I looked at, and I put it in a differential scanning calorimeter to just look at to get glass transition temperatures and melting temperatures of it. And without a doubt, the white filaments with titanium dioxide have very, very strange melting. I mean, there's little peaks and valleys and bumps all along where you would normally expect it to be just a smooth curve. Yep. I actually, just as we were talking, I pulled it up. I'll try and share this. You can see it.
Science with the professor. I like this.
You normally got to pay for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this is a DSC. Can you see it?
Yep.
This is the DSC curve of titanium dioxide filament. So there's actually two melts. That's usually how you do this. You melt it twice to see what happens. So this is the first melt. And so there's this really, I mean, this kind of thing this happens in first melts, but it's never this pronounced. And so, you see this is the cold crystallization peak. This thing here is odd. This you always see in PLA. This is the melting temperature of PLA right here in this case. And this thing, that's also due to the titanium dioxide.
What's that turquoise line?
The turquoise line here is where I was actually measuring the peak for the melting temperature.
Oh, okay.
So that's how you measure across a span to get where this actual peak is. So and I mean, this is just like pretty odd. compared to other PLAs that you might have.
You know what's funny is I love seeing this because I knew that was a problem. I knew that it was a problem for the white, and that's why I did the quarter white filament, just to have as close to a white as I could get with having as little colorant in it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You know, that's why a lot of people, if you'll notice, when they get the really cheap junky filament and they get the white, they never complain about it.
Yep.
Because they really aren't putting that much white into it.
I've noticed that.
You know, so I did the same thing and made it fancy and gave it a fancy name. So, you know, that's ultimately what I did. But yeah, it's nice to see that. I love seeing that type of data. If you're ever bored, I'll send you my colorants left and right, and let's have some fun.
Yeah, I did this for a couple of reasons, but you know, Alex was willing to send me a bunch of pellets of stuff that they were working on, and I just liked. Maybe I can pull up another one that was interesting, because I started doing this and I never really made it through. But oh, what's a good one here? This was a. There was some discussion on Twitter about what happens when you add things to filament. And this is a case where this is HTPLA versus a matte fiber HTPLA, and does it change the glass transition temperature? And in this particular example, the answer is absolutely not. So the HTPLA is the blue line here, the matte fiber HTPLA is here, and these are the melting temperatures, or sorry, the glass transition temperatures, 61.26
right,
and 61.28. So, you know, adding the matte fiber did not change glass transition temperature for this.
This is neat to see this example, Paul, because we can see the difference from the last one without the little extra dip at the end.
Yeah.
So
right. So you always have this. This is your glass transition temperature. This is the cold crystallization that you have whenever you have HTPLA. This is something right here that's always in the literature for PLA, and nobody can explain it. What this peak here is right before the melting peak. But you know,
that's interesting.
It's something that's there.
Huh.
And there are some hypotheses for what it is. There's some, I haven't looked at the literature in a long time, but there's some alpha thing. So it may be the amount of L versus D PLA that you have. So
now,
the stereoisomers.
Have you tried 3mm versus 175 doing the same thing to see if maybe the thickness changes that little?
Really
no, this is independent of that, because this is actually measuring. So these are tiny slivers of filament. So this is I have the sample weights here, 5.6 milligrams. This is why the curves are offset, actually. So this is 5.6 milligrams and 4.6 milligrams of filament that's actually being tested here. And these are, you're measuring the amount. This is the heat change. So as you're heating it, you're measuring, the simplest way to think of it is the resistance to the heat change as you're heating it in two identical containers.
Okay.
And so this is where you get these information from.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Have you tested HTPLA heat treated versus HTPLA non-heat treated?
I have not done that, but you know, the kind of
how that graph would compare.
It's not too different, actually. Okay. So what you can do is you can so these curves that we have here, which are, I know the axes are small. This is, in this case, this is time, but it could also be temperature because it's heating at a constant rate. But you usually, when you do two melts, the first melt that you've done on an HTPLA will go through, because you're melting very slowly, you're going to go through that crystallization phase, which is right here, which is around 110 or whatever. So you will see a shift in where this melting peak is whether or not you're on the first time through or you're on the second time through, and the rate at which you actually heat the sample. So this melting peak will shift depending on that. But I haven't
get
yeah.
any mica filaments.
I haven't tested them. I've actually looked at some papers that talk about filaments that have mica in them, but I have not tested those myself.
That's what I'm fascinated in. Just because I see a lot of noise on mine when I'm running.
So these are the shiny filaments, right?
Anything with glitter in it, it's almost always a mica.
Yeah, I haven't done any glitters. I did, and I don't think I have that here. I did on a whim do one of the silk filaments.
That's a questionable one because there's like 4 different methods to making silks out there right now.
That also had, because I was interested, I did it because of that whole thing where you see the blobbing and then the ooze back. Yeah. I was just like, what's going on there? That's kind of weird.
My understanding, that's TPU mixed in with the PLA for a lot of the silks, or at least the initial batches of silks it was a PLA TPU mix.
I don't know what it is in there. It is some hydrophobic component from what people have told me. I don't necessarily think that it's TPU, but it's basically some oils that they put in there that give it that silky sheen. Yeah. And that's what gives it the spring back, because you're disrupting the ability for the PLA itself to adhere, because the oils are they're not entirely miscible in the molten PLA.
That's the problem I run into, is because there are some companies that have told me they're using TPU a little bit in there. Some companies that are using PETG mixed in. And I've tried both, and I have not gotten anywhere close to that result.
I'm trying to remember who told me that. There was I posted something on Twitter about it, and somebody responded and said, "Oh, it's they're using these long aliphatics, so hydrocarbons basically, to do that. It's like greasy things, right?"
So that's what I need to find. As soon as I can figure out what I can do to make my own silks, then I'll have silks. That'd be a fun.
Isn't your line from Polyalchemy?
Yeah, it is, but they want to sell me.
I see.
And that's kind of the lazy way. I just want to figure it out.
Yeah, you can have more fun with it once you figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's more fun as well. But
because let's put it this way, I got some TPU and I got some PTG, and for like a good weekend, I was sitting there and I just kept changing the ratio in little 3% increments, and I just kept going, adding 3% more, and I went up from 100% PLA to 100% PETG by the time I was done, and I got a little shine out of it, but not enough to count.
I'll just share this one other one. This is another one that I did. This is HTPLA versus carbon fiber HTPLA, looking at glass transition temperatures. And I did both a gray and a black carbon fiber. And the main takeaway is that the glass transition temperature doesn't change at all when you add that. So that is not changing. And just to give you, maybe I will do one more, since
I would imagine carbon fiber wouldn't, because just carbon fiber just absorbs heat so well. It should be pretty much translucent in the transition, right? Am I thinking in the right concept?
Well,
it doesn't hold heat and it doesn't resist heat.
So the idea is, does it break up the polymer, which would change the glass transition temperature, and it doesn't do it in any measurable way.
Is it because of the quantity of carbon fiber?
Probably. And I just want to point this out. This is the difference that you see between PLA and PETG. Notice in this case with PETG, this is the glass transition temperature, which are now at around, somewhere around 80 degrees here. But there's the steep melting curve that you get with PETG. It's not there. So this is an amorphous solid, which is why you don't get a distinct melting curve. Whereas with PLA, because it's actually crystalline, you see this big change when it melts.
That would also kind of explain, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making my assumptions based on my previous stuff. That would also kind of explain why PETG tends to have a harder time giving up moisture to heat.
Oh, will that be?
Curve?
I'm not positive about that. I can't say. I'm not actually a polymer chemist. It turned out that I had this this instrument in my 3D printing lab. It was there as a teaching instrument that nobody had ever used. And so I was like, oh, I've got a DSC. I can measure stuff. So I did all this, but I'm not like, I'm not an expert actually in the interpretation of it. So,
because when I'm drying pellets on a raw basis, PLA, I can bone dry and put in humidity sensor at 80 degrees Celsius for 4 hours. PETG, I have to cook at 60 degrees Celsius for at least 14 hours.
Yeah, my guess is that probably it's also so remember, one of the big differences with PETG and PLA is that PETG is a copolymer, right? So you've got more than one polymer that's actually in there. You have PET and you have some glycol ester that's in there as well. The glycol ester is going to really want to hold on to water. That's what makes it so hygroscopic. So I'm thinking that because if you get any of that internally, and because it's a copolymer, it's going to be a lot harder to drive that off.
Fascinating, because I bought a couple of bins of repro PETG to compare to virgin PETG, Eastman's, and it's been interesting. I have a harder time drying repo because of that. So I'm wondering if it's just locked in there because of the repro process.
Did you say you dry the? Sorry, Sean.
No, it's cool. I'm leaving. Bye.
Are we getting too signed C for you?
No.
Chris is over there like, Chris is into this conversation.
No, it's fine. You guys have your conversation. It's just getting late and we got some stuff we gotta do before I go to bed. So.
All right, see you, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell
Sean? Good to see you, bro.
See you, Sean.
Tell everybody where to find you quick, Sean.
Oh, you can find me on Instagram,
in Ohio,
and Twitter, and Ohio. Don't find me in Ohio. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Armad's Official, and on Twitter at Armad's _. That's a cool dragon.
That's what I'm making big, Sean. Before you go,
say what?
That's on the FT5.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, I like that.
But I think it'll be 360 on the Z.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome. That's gonna be really sweet. And if anybody has a FT5 or FT6, preferably FT6, they're getting rid of, let me know, because I'm in need of a big printer, real soon. So yeah, that's that. I'm gonna head out. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yep, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Sean.
Have a good one. No, I am overly fascinated with the concept of glass transition points and hydroscopic versus hydrophobic. I don't know why I've just become addicted to that subject matter.
Well, I've got instruments that we can do things with, so
What would be a hydrophobic material that we could print?
Dear God, I can't think of any plastic that's really hydrophobic. I mean, PLA was probably the most hydrophobic out of, the standard filaments I can think of.
Right. Nylon probably would be the worst out of all of them. Like as far as, most absorbing. Because like nylon, if you want to keep a nylon part functional, you keep it moist, like keep it wet.
Yeah, nylon would be what would absorb every bit of COVID right out of the air. No. But that's my guess, and that's my thoughts of theory.
There's two factors that go into it. Again, I'm not a polymer chemist, but you look for, do you have groups on the polymer that can hydrogen bond with water? So you look for, in organic chemistry speak, do you have keto groups? Do you have ester groups? Do you have any alcohols on there? And if you have those, then it's going to bind some water. Then the second part of that is, how does the polymer pack? When you're actually forming polymers together, if the polymer is hydrogen bonding to itself, it's less likely to hydrogen bond with water. If it's not going to hydrogen bond with itself as well, then it will hydrogen bond with water and will absorb more moisture, so, from the air. There's a couple things going on there.
It's not an absolute science, but it is science.
It is, and there's people who actually understand that stuff, but
Not me.
I just kind of skirt around the edges of it. I work with polymers, but the polymers that I work with are nucleic acids and proteins. So, those will not survive in going through your extrusion line.
Yeah, I don't see myself shoving a bunch of ground meat in there.
Though I did see a group, somebody I think forwarded the email, but I'd seen it before, where they'd actually put some DNA into glass beads and then put those through the extrusion line so that you could actually detect specific DNAs within your filament after you've printed it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Would that be like for?
Well, you could track
Yeah.
filament.
Okay, that's where my mind was going with that.
You smash it up afterwards and do a couple of tests on it, and you could tell exactly where that filament came from.
Wasn't one of the that was a topic.
I'd make a filament with my DNA in it. That'd be fun.
We could do it.
That'd be a fun one.
I don't know what size glass beads you'd actually want to be pushing through, but
there you go, Dave. Genuine certification for printed solid PLA has Dave's DNA in it.
You can PCR the filament, and that it came from printed solid.
Genuine printed solid.
I just want some criminal to print something on, print something with my filament, and then I get implicated.
Well, I was going to say, Dave, it's Jesse PLA, so now you know what to do with all the tumbleweeds that are collecting at your feet.
That'd be a fun one. But no, that type of stuff interests me. It's a lot of fun, and I had no idea how much fun I would have making filament. It's amazing how much fun it is to make plastic string.
I'm telling you, we get Paul up there with random buckets. We'll have all kinds of fun.
Oh my God, yeah.
Paul just comes in with labeled buckets with like tally marks, so he knows which one's which.
And make this, and I'll go
make
okay.
this. And when it comes out, then we figure out. We have to guess what it does.
I still have a few more ideas, so I'll get with Dave and we'll talk about those.
I really want to see the pH indicating one. I think that would be cool.
The cyanidin might not be the best one. There might be better ones than this, but I'll talk with my colleagues as well and figure out, because it would be really cool for us to do with the plant project if we were actually printing the molecules that were infused with the chemical themselves. That's kind of meta. I wish Scott was here. He would have said that before me.
Yes, he is.
Oh, there he is. Speaking of that,
I'd love to see like, plant stakes with that pH level.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just to hold up the plant the whole time. That'd be kind of cool.
Hmm.
I could see that.
Could you
Why does
do,
that
this
look
is
like
going to kind of be a dumb one. Like you use a hygrometer to test the alcohol level in like beer making and wine making. Is there a chemical that you could use that would give a color indication for alcohol content?
color for alcohol content? Ooh.
If there was a reliable one, you'd think the alcohol manufacturing industry would have already done that.
Yeah,
Also-
and Matt, even to do that measurement, you got to do your before and after so that you can compare your specific gravity before fermentation, post fermentation to get that percentage. So, yeah, I mean that's being manually calculated.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if there was Dave made a good point. If there was alcohol or breweries and stuff wanted to use a hygrometer.
Somebody would have figured it out.
You could if you knew exactly, like, let's say that you were mixing isopropyl alcohol with water and you wanted to know what percentage it was, you could measure the dielectric constant of the water if it was completely deionized water, and then you could actually estimate the alcohol content from the dielectric constant, but no colorimetric assay that I know of.
Idea out the window. I was thinking you could have some fun with that.
That would be fun.
No, I like that stuff. I think that would be. I really like. I go back and I really like the idea of a pH color changing one. Everyone's got temperature changing and all that other junk, but I like the idea of pH. That's kind of a cool, unique thought.
Especially like you think about like pH strips, you have multiple colors of the rainbow based on the indicator. Like we were talking, the cyanidin goes purple to white and blue or something like that, right?
It goes red to purple to blue.
Okay, so that's kind of a narrow color band that it goes in. But if you could find something that's like pH strips indicator where it does a big range of colors based on whether it's basic or acidic, that'd be neat.
It's gonna be a little harder to do. I mean, it's, the one that immediately comes to mind that's super cheap and you can get anywhere is phenolphthalein, but that's also a
Liquid.
major diuretic.
Wow.
So if you ingest it, you will be releasing lots of stuff, even a small amount. So you don't want to be putting that into filament.
So is that a solid? Just dissolved in? Because the only time I've ever seen phenolphthalein, it's a liquid.
Well, usually you see it as a liquid because you're adding it to stuff, but
Okay.
I mean it starts as a powder.
Okay.
So you can crystallize it.
Oh yeah, that's bad stuff to give people. It'll freak them out.
Well,
Yeah.
you would worry about it being a filament and some idiot would stick it in their mouth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just don't think that you want to be doing that. You don't want the risk of that. So plus I don't actually, I haven't looked at what the melting temperature of that is. So it may not survive
Process.
extrusion.
It's fascinating. When I work with my labs, all of my colors are FDA approved. So a lot of the because there's companies that all they do is color plastic.
Right.
And so they're surprisingly limited, but apparently there's regulations that they have to follow, that their colors have to be FDA approved. I mean, large scale.
Is that because of the fact that the same pellets are used then in injection mold stuff where it will be in contact with food? So
Yes,
you just do that. Yeah.
So they're doing all on FDA approved. I don't have to pay extra to get the approval. So my stuff isn't technically FDA approved, but it uses all the same processes.
Once we run all Paul's batches through your extruder, the extruder won't be FDA approved anymore. So
It's still not approved right now, I
no,
guarantee.
no.
You know,
We'll have to bring in a special rabbi and have it,
Kosher.
re-koshered.
Well, one of the people I'm working on the garden project with actually works at the FDA, so get you in
Hey.
there. I don't think she
Get
has anything
going.
to do with approvals for those things, but
if we get some moderately good mixture type of stuff, I can literally send off the raw material to the lab to have them pelletize it properly and stabilize it, because the other problem you run into is proper mix ratios and all that stuff. You have to worry about it. And that's kind of their specialty that they ultimately do, is they stabilize it into pellet form.
Nice.
So we make some test ones and then we go, this is very successful. Now let's see if we can stabilize it.
And then you get your pellets, then you get your nice even mix and blend, because everything's the same size and shape in it.
And it would be even that way as it does its color shifting. It would be a smooth color shift. It wouldn't have,
Ouchie.
it wouldn't be splotchy.
Yeah.
Right. Super rich color in this part and then fades out here.
Right.
Slick.
So that would definitely, we make some test ones and goes, hey, that looks pretty good. All right, let's see if it maintains it or if we need to pelletize it. That's a face.
She looks so happy.
I can't believe she's still
Excited
awake.
to be
She's gonna
here.
be up early in the morning.
I don't care because I'm doing a popcorn tasting with my cousin.
oh,
Fun.
A friend of ours that has a popcorn stand, makes all her own, did a quiz. She gives out like sample bags of different flavors, and the kids have to guess what flavors they are.
nice.
Cool.
That's impressive. That's real testing right there.
You look tired.
I'm not tired. I'm gonna stay up all night.
I wish I even thought I could do that anymore.
I know I can. I just know I shouldn't too.
It's kind of funny. It's not in this picture. Those are my regular dryers back there. And they're hot air dryers. So they can really only get the plastic so dry. And that works pretty well. But I just bought a desiccant dryer, high temp desiccant dryer, and got that set up in the warehouse. And I, of course, got to fix it because I bought it used. So it's got a little bit of work to it, but I'm looking forward to getting that going.
Is it one of these ones that like rotate? So you've got like a desiccant pool and then it heats and then it exchanges and.
Yep, it's a 3-chamber one. So the idea is that desiccant doesn't for other people. Paul, I pretty much guarantee could probably say it as well, but desiccant really doesn't dry until it's about 120 degrees Celsius. And you're not drying pellets at 120 degrees Celsius, so desiccant takes on moisture up till about then. I mean, it's got its scale, but there you go. So the way these desiccant dryers work is they'll usually have 3 chambers of desiccant. And the idea is that one chamber has its own blower, blowing 120 degrees Celsius hot air through it, and then exhausting that out to the room to dry out the desiccant. And then it rotates over and it's at a cooling stage. So it cools back down to relatively room temperature. And then it rotates around, and then that one has the air go through it at whatever your drying temperature is to collect the moisture out of the air before it enters the chamber to dry the pellets. And it has 3 separate containers, and at any time there's one container at each of those 3 stages.
It's interesting that it's got a cooling stage, because so
you want to absorb moisture if it's still hot.
Well, yeah, I guess because you're blowing the air across the pellets into the desiccant, not through the desiccant. And in HVAC, we have desiccant wheels, and it's energy recovery. As the air's passing across, the desiccant is warming up. It rotates around, brings the fresh air in from outside, and preheats the air. It takes the heat back out of the desiccant. So I was thinking that way, but yeah, you're doing it the other way. You're down, you're upstream from it, pulling the moisture out of the air going through.
Right. So that's why it's 3 stages in that case.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was thinking you could benefit from pulling the heat off the desiccant as it cools, but yeah, that doesn't work.
Not really, because then you just kind of be wasting your time. You want the hot air to go over the desiccant to go through it and then get reheated and
Right.
cycle through over and over. But I got to tell you, it was fascinating the last like 6 months studying on just how do you dry stuff? You know, it's been a lot of fun discovering all the ways the vacuum dryers versus just hot air dryers versus desiccant dryers. It's a fascinating thing. You know, vacuum dryers, I went and looked at that and I said, okay, that's just too much work. And then I went to desiccant dryers and I went, okay, that's the way to go. That's a reasonable approach.
Yeah, vacuum dryer. I'm assuming the pellets go in a vacuum chamber, pull a vacuum on it to boil water out.
Ultimately,
Which is
a heated vacuum chamber.
a heated vacuum chamber.
Yeah. Yeah, the heat would speed it up. Yeah.
Well, you need something to move the moisture upwards before, you know, to do something to get to a boiling point.
Right.
Because the water, even in a vacuum, I don't think water in a vacuum boils at room temperature. It needs to be a little bit warmer.
Well, it'll also crystallize, and then it won't.
Right. You can freeze water in a vacuum quick.
Exactly. So then you have a barrier and to actually getting it off.
Right.
Yep.
So you got to heat it. I've got a little vacuum oven in 3D printing lab at work, so that's what I'll do, like PETGs and stuff to get them dry.
Dry them real quick.
Yeah.
See, small vacuum ovens seem very accomplishable, but when I try to do, you know, the 500-gallon vacuum oven, it adds a whole layer of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't want to take a chamber and put a vacuum on 500 gallons. I just think that would be a bad thing.
Be one hell of a vacuum pump.
And if it went wrong,
Yeah.
desiccant dryers just seem easier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Better than towel drying.
What was that?
Better than towel drying.
Yeah,
Towel drying.
you know, and I mean, hot air drying gets you pretty low, but it's not aggressively drying, as I like to say. You know, it's not getting you down to that less than, you know, 0.5% type of, you know, moisture level.
I was just going to ask, what is the percentage that when you're drying, like what is the target percentage of moisture content?
The ideal one from PLA, from what I've read so far, has been 0.15%. That is like considered perfection. You know, air dryers definitely going to get you in that 5% range. You know, and that's okay. That's what most people are doing it at. Some of the fancier companies out there are doing desiccant and getting it at 0.15%, but 0.5 is good enough for 3D printing filament.
Yeah.
And I just want to get it more so I can technically say I got it there.
And those are your pellets, so that's what's going into that. But right, I mean, isn't the first thing you do is after it comes out,
It goes in a water bath.
it's going into water, right, to cool?
After it's been brought to temperature and extruded, it goes through a water bath.
Okay.
But it stays in that water for under a second.
Okay.
And then that water is immediately blown off with air knives. So it doesn't have any time to really collect any new moisture or anything like that. So it's ultimately blown off.
It's surface if it's anything.
It's surface if it's anything, and then it's blown off and then put into a bag with desiccant with only surface moisture.
And Dustin does a very good job with all that blowing.
Yes. Well, no, Dustin sucks. But that's kind of the process. So the drier you can get it, the better off you are. And I want to do desiccant because if I can do desiccant, I can get myself into some more interesting additives. I really want to get some PBAT in there. That'll definitely toughen up PLA, put me into the PLA plus category. And if I can get that moisture down, that should definitely keep stringing down. So it's a fascinating thing.
RC Maniac asks, not to distract from the plastic talk, this is to David. How goes the perfect spooling system you said you wanted or were working on?
So as you can imagine, I've been extremely busy making actual filament instead of actually building the next machine, but I am still building it. The concept is respooling. So basically it comes off the line and I want to put onto big spools. And then I have a separate machine that I load the big spools on and make, the 1 kilograms and the smaller spools off of. My goal is to build that separate machine to be as good as what I'm currently getting as my spooling. And then after I perfect all of that process, then I'll go back and do perfect spooling. Perfect spooling ultimately, right now, most spoolers, the way that they work is they use pretty much the bobbin spoolers that you would see in textile mills. And it's really a fixed linear motion moving back and forth while it's spinning to lay the filament down on the spool. The perfect spooler that I want to build is what the higher end guys use, but I'm not going to spend $40,000 to make a spool. I'll build it and make it myself. But the perfect spooler works off the idea of it will have a linear actuator that moves the filament over 1.75 millimeters for every rotation of the shaft while it's spooling. But all of that has to happen on a respooling system. You can't do that live off the line because live off the line, the spool spins too fast to lay it down nicely onto the spool. Because you can imagine if you're doing 60 or 70 RPM, actually it's closer to 100 RPM. If you're doing 100 RPM and you're trying to lay down the perfect spool, that's never going to really happen at those speeds because plastic just naturally, it's going straight and trying to coil. It's going to get a little wobble in it as it's going down on the spool. So you want to be going kind of slow, put it through a straightener, lay it down in perfect increments, and then it looks pretty. And so far, I would do that only for an aesthetic. But I want the challenge, so I'm still working on it. That is more of a mechanical problem than a chemical problem. That's just a ton of sitting down and figuring out all the belts and motors and making a drive system that can safely pull a spool of 25 kilograms without snapping and lay it down nicely. So, and yeah, you're absolutely right. The speed doesn't matter because after I build one perfect machine, I can build 5 of them right next to each other and take all day to respool. It doesn't matter. So I'm just working on building the perfect spooler, and that'll take a little bit of time. Mainly because mechanically, to build something that does that is not hard. It's just building something that does that with that much weight and tension behind it is hard.
And then Dave, I imagine you get that rolling, that makes your whole production process easier because then you're not necessarily sitting there every 5 minutes putting a new spool on. You can just go to some big boys.
Yep.
And how long would it take you to fill one of those mega spools? One of those.
Well, I want to be able to hold a 25 kilogram spool should take, doing the math, about 4 hours.
25 kilograms or 25 pounds?
25 kilograms.
That's a big ass spool.
That's a huge spool.
Plenty of time to have your lunch and have a quick break before you have to go back and unspool again.
The whole idea with going with a respooler is that if I can get my respoolers properly working across the board, is that then I start buying the second extrusion line and the third extrusion line, and I can still have the same person run all 3 of them.
Yeah. And
Nice.
we make 25 kilograms of pH indicating filament.
Yeah. And yeah, RC Maniac, that is right. It's about 25 kilograms in about 4 hours, give or take. That's about right. So,
Slick.
and then yeah, just have them re-spool off on the side. Makes life a lot easier. That's how you get one person to run 3 or 4 lines.
And
Would
that
you have a problem with, as you re-spool, would the weight reduction on the 25 kilogram spool start to affect your speed at all?
No, you would literally set your speed based on a heavy spool and try not to put too much intelligence into it and
Okay.
just accept the slowness of it. You know, I mean, yeah, you could speed up towards the end, but why try to write all that logic?
Right.
Just let it go.
Well, guys, I think I'm fading out here.
I'm right behind you, Paul.
Yeah, we're reaching the end here.
Yep. I think that was a good run. I got to get a certain little one to sleep.
Good luck, brother.
I just got a dirty look. All right. Paul, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me and my 3D printing adventures, PPoxStelus at Twitter. That's where you'll find me.
You can catch me at mchrisp1 on the Twitters. Probably catch some sliding Legolini target practice at some point this weekend.
You can catch me pretty much anywhere in this room 24/7 lately. But other than that, you can find me printed solid on Twitter, on Facebook, and all the other social media and all that other fun stuff.
And of course, you can find the Friday 3D Printing Community Hangout every other week. The next stream is May 29th, which is that Memorial Weekend?
I don't know.
May 29th, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can do the translation to your time zone from there. It's easier for me that way. Probably end up just doing another general hangout like tonight, and the conversation will go where the conversation goes. See what cool things Paul's got cooked up his sleeve for Dave to put through the extrusion line. And we'll see you guys all back here. You can follow F3DPCH on Twitter, F3DPC at F3DPCH, or just go to F3DPCH.com, and all the links are there for YouTube and everything. If you like the streams and you want to be notified when we go live, because here as of late we've just kind of been posting a link right when we go live. Hit the subscribe button on Twitter and ring the bell, and you'll get notifications hopefully shortly after we go live. Thanks everybody for joining tonight on the panel, and thank you everybody for joining on from the chat as well. We'll see you guys all again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, chat.
Yep, thanks guys.
Thanks everyone.
I'm sorry, love.